Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our very first virtual lecture as part of Lancaster Water Week 2020. I can't think of a better way to kick off Water Week than to host a panel discussion with Lancaster Clean Water Partners and our 6 clean water professionals. These panelists are on the ground on a daily basis working on projects that are helping make Lancaster County move toward clean streams and rivers, and that is what Lancaster Water Week is all about. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be shared with everyone who pre-registered within the next several days. We have multiple other virtual lectures this week, and I want to highlight several. This evening, we will be joined by Jeff Beloga of Becker Engineering and Charlie Miller of Blue Green Insights to talk about protecting New Holland's water supply while developing a native tree arboretum and park for the community to enjoy. Tomorrow at noon, we will be joined by Turkey Hill Dairy, the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and the Maryland and Virginia Milk Producers Cooperative to talk about the work they are doing to implement clean water best management practices on regional dairy farms. We also have virtual lectures coming up this week that focus on the history of the Conestoga River, pollinator and rain garden design, and the hidden world of stream insects. Please consider taking the Water Week pledge to take action to clean up our local streams. With your pledge, you get a free kit and helpful information and a free native tree or shrub. To sign up for an event or to take the pledge, please visit lancasterwaterweek.org. Finally, Water Week is only possible because of the very generous support of our sponsors. These are local organizations and businesses that are passionate about clean water. Through their generous support, we are able to host these events, and they've helped us contribute over $120,000 in grants to clean water implementation here in Lancaster County. Turkey Hill Dairy has been our presenting sponsor since the founding of Water Week in 2017. Today, I also want to recognize the Campbell Foundation and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and their Keystone 10 Million Tree Partnership, who have generously donated the native trees you will receive with your Water Week pledge. I also want to recognize the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, Flyway Excavating, and Land Studies, who are part of today's panel discussion. With that, I want to turn over the program to Clean Water Partners Coordinator Allison Gibson, who will be facilitating today's discussion.
Thank you, Fritz. We are so glad to be here, and the Lancaster Clean Water Partners is very excited to be a member of the panel as well as part of this collective effort for clean water across Lancaster County. There are so many fun stories that I could tell from my own clean water career path of playing in the streams and growing up here in Lancaster, but it's common among many people that the clean water of Lancaster County, whether it's in the stream or whether it's coming out of our tap, it's this trust that we have in our community and our quality of life. And so the Lancaster Clean Water Partners really is that communal group bringing together so many of those partners that have been working on clean water for years and years. There are so many stories, there are so many superstars, and I am very eager to share many of those experiences through their own voices today on the panel. As you see from the Clean Water Partners, our mission and vision are really tied together. With clean and clear water by the year 2040 as our vision, we are using our mission of pulling these partner organizations together in a coordinated fashion. So with today, as the goal of today is to be able to share those stories, be able to show you how that common agenda, that common goal of clean and clear takes so many shapes, and across our entire community in so many different sectors, clean water is a huge piece of this. So what we are going to share with you today are the stories from those individuals, from many of our actual partners across the county. There's going to be a Q&A session at the end. And so if a question comes to you along the way, I encourage you to put it in the Q&A section. And we will come back to those at the end of our panel discussion today, and we'll make sure that we get as many of the answers as we can for you today, but also in the follow-up opportunities and resources that we'll share afterward. So I'm going to open it with one of our partner organizations, the Lancaster County Conservation District. One of the erosion and sediment technicians is Emily Broish, and she is a fantastic partner here with us in many ways. I'm going to turn it over to her so that she can share some of those stories with us.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, so I work in the Erosion and Sediment Control Department at the County Conservation District. And just a bit of background, Pennsylvania has had erosion control regulations since 1972. And while erosion is a natural process, many activities like farming or construction create the potential for accelerated erosion. And essentially our goal is to minimize that potential and keep soil where we need it and keep it from going where we don't want it. And as many of you know, we don't want it to end up in our streams. So what does that look like in terms of our work? We review building plans, we inspect earth disturbance sites, we respond to complaints, in addition to issuing a number of different types of permits to make sure that they meet regulation. So to give you an overview of that process, I have here, we review a typical ENS plan like the one that you see here. You can see the contours to get an idea of the slope. Here a house is proposed on somewhat of a hill with the driveway at the bottom. And we are looking for what erosion controls are going to be installed once ground is broken for building. I've highlighted in orange what is called compost filter sock, and you can see an example of that in the upper right. It allows water to pass through when it rains, but sediment stays behind like a sieve. So we would evaluate if that proposed filter sock is adequate. Is it big enough? In this case, the sock is a bit undersized given the slope, so we would ask for that to be revised so that it holds up in an average rain event. The rain we had on Friday is a different story, but we're kind of looking for that average rain event. Once building starts, we go out and inspect these controls to make sure they're installed correctly and that they're maintained. Another control we may see is filter fence on the bottom right, very similar to filter sock, and actually we're seeing less of it because filter sock does a pretty good job. But you can see here that the fence is failing, and that could be for a number of reasons, but these are the situations that we hope to avoid so that sediment stays on site. So in the next slide, one enjoyable part of this job, in addition to the people that we get to work with, excavators and contractors and engineers and township staff, is the opportunity to be outdoors where we may have a wildlife encounter. I have a picture here of something called erosion control matting. It's something else that we may look for depending on the site, typically on disturbed areas with steep slope, sometimes in swales. But it helps protect the soil by holding straw mulch in place until enough vegetation grows to really hold things together. And we don't want to substitute one environmental problem for another. So I should note that matting is not perfect. It's often made of plastic. It may get caught in mowers. It may entangle wildlife. And the snake is not my favorite wildlife encounter, but nonetheless, I don't want to see it get entangled either. So I'd like to highlight the close-up of the completely biodegradable matting on the bottom right as an alternative. It can be made of different materials like jute, coconut fiber, and I think there's even potential for hemp fiber somewhere at some point down the line. But on the next slide, inlet protection on a construction site is another BMP that helps to keep our water clean. It would be especially important if the inlet drains directly to a stream, or in the case of Lancaster City, where there's a combined sewer system, we want to keep as much sediment as we can out of that system. So here the filter bag installed below the inlet grate captures sediment, and we would inspect to make sure that the bags are being cleaned out periodically. Many of you are likely familiar with the stormwater basins to hold back runoff during a rainstorm, like the one here on the bottom left. This one is partially complete, and at the end of a permitted project, we would perform a final inspection and make sure that it's fully vegetated and functioning correctly so that it doesn't discharge muddy water to the receiving stream. And there on the bottom right, you can see the outlet structure of a basin. This basin is complete and fully stabilized. Stormwater basins can be very land consumptive, but I'll end on this positive note. We are seeing a trend toward bioretention basins proposed with native seed mixes like the one here with the black-eyed Susan. And it's very rewarding to see how they can manage our runoff and filter our stormwater, but also function to provide valuable pollinator habitat. And I think that's something that's very promising. So there you go, quick overview of our work, and thank you for your time.
Emily, thank you so much. I'm curious to know how you got into this. What is the background that sparked your passion in this kind of sediment control?
I guess you could say I've always been interested in the outdoors. I majored in environmental studies, as an undergraduate, but a number of other majors may be represented by our staff, fisheries or environmental resource management, geology, any type of natural science is helpful. But yeah, so that's sort of my path.
Okay, and the Lancaster County Conservation District, you're in the erosion and sedimentation team. They also have an ag tech team, an agriculture focus. How do those teams interact, and what does that look like for the career with someone at the Lancaster County Conservation District?
Yeah, we frequently coordinate with our ag staff. They may be responsible for reviewing an operation on a farm for compliance with erosion regulation. We don't get into active farming, erosion that deals with active farming. That's sort of a different set of regulations, but oftentimes you're right, there is an overlap and we have the opportunity to communicate with each other. And sometimes that looks like if a farmer is looking to install a best management practice on their farm, it might be something that they have to get a permit for, which would then kind of come through our office. So there's sort of some back and forth there between both sides.
Great, thank you. I'm curious if you have a favorite kind of project. I would imagine that with the way land use is changing across Lancaster and across many parts of our state, what's your favorite kind of project? Every day is probably different, but.
Yeah, every day is different. Sometimes I really enjoy the project that might be a bit smaller in scale and you get the opportunity to interact a bit more one-on-one with a landowner. And I have to say in Lancaster, our excavators are very aware of the regulations and what's expected. So that makes my job very easy, or a lot easier, because we have willing partners on both sides. And generally, if there is an issue on a site, it's generally a quick conversation, and most people are very willing to kind of make the adjustments.
Well, thank you, Emily. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us today, and I think we'll be able to circle back around as we make our way through the panel. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
So moving on to one of our next partner organizations, Demetrius Dennison is with the Ephrata Area Joint Authority. He is one of the water operators at the drinking water plant, and just a fascinating story of his background. But I am so glad to say that we got to hear from Demetrius with our Watershed Leadership Academy. In Lancaster, we have a group of 10 scholars who are working through a year-long plus academy, and Demetrius was one of our speakers earlier this year and has some amazing connections here in Lancaster. So I'm eager for him to tell us about his career path in clean water. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for that awesome introduction. I truly appreciate it. Again, my name is Demetrius Dennison, and I'm a water operator here at Ephrata Area Joint Authority. First, I would like to say that I'm just one person. It's a team effort at the end of the day. I'm glad to have the opportunity to work alongside great men in the field, make great men and women in the field. And also just a special shout out to Ephrata, the borough of Ephrata, for giving us the support and tools that we need to be successful. So just a snapshot about what we do here. We are a conventional filter plant. So what that pretty much means is that it goes through the processes of coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, filtration, and disinfection. So we pull in the raw water from the creek, we bring it in and we add our coagulant. We get it stirred up, and due to differences in the charge, it allows for the particles to clump together. And as it goes through the flocculation chamber, just think of it as a giant mixing bowl. And once it gets a good amount of mixing in, it continues out its journey and goes around to the sedimentation basins. And then the solids, they fall down to the bottom, and we take that thin layer that's actually on top and we bring it over to our filters, and then we filter it through our mixed media. So it just has different layers to pick up any of the remaining particles. And then we also add chlorine for disinfection purposes. So that's just a snapshot about the job. You can see the pictures here. They're showing, we have an in-house laboratory. So we do some testing in-house, and then we also have the ability to send out for a third party to do some results as well. I actually have an interesting story on how I got into the field. I still remember to this day, like most young people, I wasn't entirely sure exactly what I wanted to do. So I changed my major a few different times. And I remember talking with my grandmother in particular about this. I was standing in my college dorm room and I was telling her that I wanted to do something that A, couldn't be outsourced, 2, would always be in demand, and 3, just having the ability to help people and really make a difference. And she said that Thaddeus Stevens just came out with a new program, Water and Environmental Technology, and that I should check it out. And I can honestly say that going to Thaddeus Stevens College was one of the best decisions that I personally have ever made. The environment there as a whole and the professors, they're amazing, and they really do everything that they can to prepare tomorrow's future leaders. So definitely, I just want to say thank you to them. I would say that one of the most rewarding things about my job in particular is knowing that we're on the front line. So again, we're taking water that's untreated, and just knowing that we're making sure that that water is safe to drink, and just really making a difference in the community as a whole. And I'm very happy with the field choice, and I'm still early in my career, and I'm excited to learn and grow. And I just want to say thank you again for everybody that's here, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Demetrius. That was fantastic. I love hearing that story about the conversation with your grandmother, the personal connection, personal reasons. I'm curious what some of your colleagues, like the other people either at the plant or in the industry, other people that were in your program, are there other directions that either brought them to a similar place or a common, I'm thinking of the people in the program at Thaddeus Stevens, a common type of industry or job position that they may have gone to as well?
Gotcha. So I definitely stay in contact with a lot of my classmates since graduation, and I even talked to my brother about this as well, where Stevens, and especially the water program, it really provides a strong foundation that allows you so many different avenues that you can actually branch out into. I know some people that have gone to finish like their degrees for engineering, some people that work in laboratories. So there's a number of different avenues that you can take. One of the things for myself personally is that I would like to help volunteer and serve on different water projects like overseas. So that's kind of how my passion and clean water intertwine. So.
Wow. Were you one of those kids playing in the creek when you were a kid, or were you the one playing with the technology and the chemistry set, or both?
I would say I was definitely really out there. I really did enjoy being outdoors and having a good time. But honestly, like looking back on it, if you would have told me that I'd be working in the water field a few years ago, I wouldn't have thought too much about it, because I really, like most people, I didn't really know where our water came from. I just knew that you turn on the tap and out comes the water. So we're very fortunate here. There's a lot of places around the world where people are walking many miles just to get water, and even then that water is not safe and clean. So yeah.
Oh, that's a really good point. I'm curious, and we can get to this later, but if there's resources that you have, or that, like you pointed out, Ephrata Borough, if there's resources for homeowners or for landowners that would help with that drinking water, whether it's the source water protection or, like you mentioned, the water that your plant pulls from, or the local creeks, if there's resources that you think would be especially helpful, we'll be happy to post those links or send them as attachments later on. So thank you so much, Demetrius. We really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So one of the other partners that's involved in this collective effort is Ryan Davis, and he's with the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. He works as a forest program manager. You may see him out planting riparian buffers. You may see him out with lots of tree tubes and lots of little bitty trees, and his goal is growing those. So I am eager to introduce Ryan and hear his story of the growth of trees and the need for them here in Lancaster.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. So I work for the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. We are obviously a regional environmental nonprofit. Our Pennsylvania office is located right here in Lancaster County. Because I'm sure you're all very well aware, Lancaster County's water quality is not really fantastic. So we are actually the biggest polluting county to the Chesapeake Bay and the entire watershed. And Lancaster County alone is responsible for about 21% of the pollution reductions that Pennsylvania is going to be doing for the bay itself. So there's a lot of work to do here. Our office does a lot of different things, a lot of broad applications. We do some green infrastructure work in the city. We do a lot of agricultural conservation. So basically what that entails is working with farmers to help sign them up for programs to fund conservation practices that will improve their farm for their own operation, but also improve the water quality, make sure the water that's coming off of that farm is clean before it reaches the stream. And then sort of the last line of defense is the riparian forest buffers that we try to plant along as many streams as possible. And that's kind of where I come into the picture. So you've probably heard about riparian forest buffers. Riparian just means stream side in Latin. Back a couple hundred years ago, before Europeans arrived to this area, pretty much all of our streams had forests surrounding them in some way, shape, or form, whether those were, wetland forests or just, forests like you would see abutting a stream right now. And so our streams kind of adapted to those conditions, and really it's hard for them to be as healthy as they need to be, or as we want them to be, without having trees around them. So I manage our reforestation programs. We do these riparian forest buffers, but also converting areas of lawn in the upland to forests to also improve water quality. And so this entails working with landowners, working with volunteers, taking care of the trees after they're planted, and getting them planted. So it's a lot of work, pretty busy running around doing that. But happy to answer any questions, or if this is something that's interesting to people. And I think it's nice because a good place to start is to come out to one of these volunteer plantings, and you can literally get your hands dirty and go from there. Because of COVID, there's going to be limited opportunities this year to do volunteer plantings, and probably next spring as well. But as soon as we can get out safely in groups again, and not have to worry about anyone's health and safety, then we're going to go back all in. So there will be plenty of opportunities for you.
Thank you, Ryan. I know that you are so passionate about the certain species and planting native. And so I'm curious how that science background really played an important role in your career development. Was it more important to you to know the scientific Latin names, or like you've talked about volunteer opportunities? How do those two interplay with kind of your career story?
Yeah, great question. So I came at this, like pretty much everybody so far, and probably everybody in the audience, I grew up always outside. I like to say I kind of had a feral childhood. I had very little adult supervision, and was just kind of outside fishing and shooting pellet guns, and lucky that nothing bad happened. It was a different time in the early 90s when supervision wasn't really much of a thing, and so I just kind of grew up always wanting to be involved with nature. I didn't really have the words for it, but I wanted to be an ecologist. I wanted to kind of work in and study the kind of connections between everything, how everything works together, and then work on improving things to a more natural status. And so I went to North Carolina State University, go Wolfpack, for wildlife biology. Ended up, I worked around the country doing wildlife jobs for a while, then went to West Virginia University for a master's in wildlife biology. I had some forestry minors in there as well. But really that is kind of how I approach this. I think if you're interested in a career in reforestation, you certainly don't need to have an education in ecology per se. But I think it does take a long time for you to get good at it. There is a lot of work to do. I think if you're willing to learn and put in the time and put in the work, no matter what your background is. I mean, I've been doing this since 2014, and I feel like it's really just been the last couple years that I've actually gotten good at it, because there's just so many factors. There's every factor, right? It's the environment. We can't really control everything, and so that's kind of the way I come at it, is trying to look into the future, hundreds of years potentially, and every single thing that we do can impact what this area will look like in the future. So trying to use that education and then take that infused with all of my experience, but then also the practicality. That's where, because ideally we would be reforesting as much of everywhere as we possibly could. But obviously we need to grow food, we need places to live, so that intersection of the landowners and what they need and what they want out of this, and then what we kind of need to have good stream quality is sort of where what the job is, basically. And then working with the volunteers has been really fantastic. I think if we were not in Lancaster that has such a really vigorous community of minded people and volunteers, I think my work would be a lot harder. So I am very grateful for this community. Not only do we have volunteers that help us do tons of plantings, we also have a volunteer maintenance corps. We call them riparian rangers. Basically a volunteer. We try to find a site that's close to their work or their home, and they go there once a month over the growing season and help us take care of the trees. So it's a cool way. I mean, it really helps me out immensely, but it also is a cool way for people to get involved. And you know, if you come out and plant the trees, it feels good, but to watch them grow as well is something that I really like sharing with people, because you
Thank
kind
you,
of
Ryan.
can't get that
Thank you.
feeling.
We're really grateful for your leadership you've provided for the Lancaster Clean Water Partners as one of our action team co-leads. There's a group of buffer specialists around the county, and Ryan's one of our co-leads there, along with Ashley Spots from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So I think it's very appropriate that the slogan there from one of our Water Week sponsors is also that clean water grows on trees. So we really appreciate all the work that you do, and especially towards that action step of creating habitat. So we'll come back to that, and I think some ways that that can really tie in with other work as well. And it ties in well with our next speaker, with Kelly Gutschall from Land Studies, and the work that you're doing as a landscape architect with your entire team, and kind of the creative, literally groundbreaking and also figuratively ways that you're working on clean water here in Lancaster County. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here today.
There we go. Thank you, Allison. I apologize. I'm still learning the technology here. As Allison said, I'm Kelly Gutschall. I'm president and landscape architect with Land Studies. We're an environmental restoration and planning firm based in Lidditz. And we do work throughout the Chesapeake Bay, focusing on the Chesapeake Bay, but throughout Pennsylvania and Maryland. We have approximately 35 professional staff that includes scientists, engineers, water resource engineers, landscape architects, environmental resource managers, etc. So we've been in business for 30 years. And, you know, I would say that my career has really been, as opposed to a path, it's been more of a circle. I grew up in Lancaster County, actually in Millersville, and you know, my interest in the environment really started running around the banks of the Little Conestoga and camping and spending a lot of time outside. I also really enjoyed geography, and I enjoyed earth sciences and things like that. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, you know, to go to school or from a career standpoint, but I had a friend, my brother's friend, who was a landscape architect, and I thought, that's interesting. That kind of really hits on a lot of the things that I'm interested in, and there's also a creative component to it. So after graduating from Penn State, you know, this Amish girl from Lancaster County landed on Long Island, New York, working for a large residential design build firm. And I say that because everyone on Long Island referred to me as Amish, because everyone from Lancaster was Amish at that time. So after, you know, kind of getting my feet wet with design build, spent some time in Philadelphia and Wilmington and Southern Chester County working for some planning firms and architecture firms. And I have to say that the biggest inspiration for me was working with a graduate from Penn's program at the time under Ian McHarg. And there's a book that he wrote called Design with Nature. And he was kind of the father of ecological design from back in the day, was really doing some amazing kind of planning work, almost watershed type work. And I was totally inspired with the approach that he was taking at the time. And at the time, it was really kind of ahead of its kind of cutting edge. Because the firms really were not integrating natural resource management with planning at that time. So Then fast forward, get married. My husband started a company called Land Studies and doing regulatory compliance, so more wetland delineations and things like that. We were only being hired for purposes of, delineating that wetland and to meet regulation. And we really came together and saw the potential of integrating both this planning approach that I was so fascinated by and really wanted to take on, plus the natural resource management component that he brought to it. So we changed the focus of the company and really looked at this approach of planning, water resource planning, and looking for solutions to water resource issues. And we moved our young family, myself and my husband, to Lidditz, and our case study, kind of our first model project, was a Lidditz Run watershed, and that was about 25 years ago. The community embraced the approach, which is a community-based approach to watershed planning, and we will be talking about that this evening at Millport Conservancy. We have some of the maps, some of those original maps that we put together and things like that that we'll have out on the at the Conservancy this evening. And the success now, about 30 years later, I think is really driven by a lot more of the regulations. When we first started doing kind of integrating, created wetlands and reforestation and meadows and things like that, we were kind of pushed to the back a little bit, 30 years ago, 25 years ago. But the regulations and really seeing the need to improve water quality has made a big change in the industry. And even more important, the monitoring and the science that supports the type of work that we're doing. So today, land studies are, three main focus areas is, again, that planning component, which is really, really my focus and kind of my passion. The design and the engineering component, we have, the science that really is needed to back up this type of work. And then the installation, we do design build, so we actually install the projects. And it's very important to learn by doing and putting the lessons learned over the years. So it's a good segue into Brad Chubb is going to be talking. We're actually working together on a large restoration project in New York right now. And the opportunity that, with this professional career has really been able to engage so many different groups, from the Clean Water Partners to the Alliance, to different conservancies, watershed groups. It's just a wonderful career being able to pull so many groups together. Thank you,
Thank you, Kelly. Wonderful. That lends us perfectly to our next panelist. We really appreciate your story, and a reminder that tonight you can find out more about the amazing work Land Studies has been doing there in the Lidditz watershed with another Water Week event. So Brad, I'm going to turn it over to you and get another perspective on what the actual restoration work on the ground looks like and how that career path really shaped up for you. Brad, are you with us? If you can just hit unmute. There you go, Brad.
All right. Sorry about that. Some settings needed changed in that amount of time. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Clubb from Flyway Excavating in Mountjoy. I grew up nearby in Manheim Township and then attended the mechanical engineering program at the University of Delaware. I left college before finishing there to work full-time in my father's general construction company. At that time, he was developing the Flyway Business Park across from the Lancaster Airport, and I learned to do site construction work there. 3 years later, though, I founded Flyway Excavating in 1987 when I was 26 years old. My 3 years at Delaware and the background that I got growing up around my dad's business in the construction industry pretty well prepared me to own and run a site construction business. Initially, Flyway performed general site construction, built streets, did utility work for private owners and local municipalities, as do most other excavating or site contracting firms. Though we soon began to specialize and do more environmentally friendly focused projects. Flyway started working with Donegal Trout Unlimited back in 1994, doing a few small stream restoration projects. And in 1997, we completed our first low-head dam removal project near WGL-TV in Lancaster. Since then, we have focused on a variety of types of projects in and around waterways throughout the entire part of eastern Pennsylvania. So for the rest of my presentation, rather than to continue to speak about my career path, which was rather unplanned and haphazard, I like to spend the rest of my time highlighting a few opportunities in the construction industry that are well suited to careers with an environmental focus and actually building things in the waterways. The Lancaster County Career and Technology Center has an excellent program for high school students that provides the basic training needed to pursue a career in heavy equipment operation. As you can see in the accompanying pictures, we complete our projects using a variety of large construction equipment that's suitable to work in soft ground conditions and the streams, ponds, and lakes where we do our jobs. The heavy equipment program at the CTC is a year-long program geared for students in their senior year of high school and come from one of the 16 sending schools in Lancaster County. Flyway currently has 26 field employees, and I'm thrilled to let you know that 9 of those individuals came from that program and are graduates of the CTC program. CTC also runs an adult program that, and is also, in addition, is joined with Associated Builders and Contractors to run a 3-year-long apprenticeship program, which is an extension of the training that they get in the high school or adult programs. We currently have 4 employees that are enrolled in the heavy equipment apprenticeship program. In order to complete that program, a student not only has to take the 3 years of classroom training, but they need 2,000 hours per year of on-the-job training with an employer like Flyway, which constitutes a total of 6,000 hours. As you know, the previous presenter, Kelly Gutschall from Land Studies, spoke briefly about the Fox Run Stream Restoration Project that our firms are doing jointly together in Dover Township and York County. Flyway's supervisor on that site is actually a 2000 graduate, and that was our first graduate that we employ from the CTC, and he's been running work for us at Flyway for 17 years. His 6-man crew there also includes a 2019 and a 2020 graduate, which obviously are very recent. Nearly all our employees that came to us from the CTC who started working on a co-op basis during their senior year of school. The crew at Fox Run also includes an operator that graduated from a heavy equipment training program up at Penn Tech College near Williamsport. Our work on Fox Run includes 3,500 lineal feet of channel or floodplain restoration on the Fox Run and adjacent tributary. You see the largest picture is a completed segment of Fox Run to your left. And then there's a picture in the lower right-hand corner that shows some equipment working there. That's a drone shot. Other potential careers paths for management or supervision positions at Flyway include attending a 2 or 4-year civil engineering program. One of the 2nd-generation owners here graduated from the University of Delaware and currently does most of our estimating. And we also employ a project manager with a civil degree from Penn Tech who obtained his PE professional engineering license before coming to Flyway, and he's a project manager. And finally, we have another individual here that has a 2-year civil engineering tech degree from Penn Tech and is working in the field and becoming a field supervisor. And the last 2 slides there, you see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a drone shot of a project we did at the Westtown School near Westchester, removing 57,000 yards of sediment that accumulated over 40 years in their lake there, and we rebuilt their dam spillway. They're generally not considered environmentally friendly projects, but you can see the turtles in the middle slide there seem to like their new home. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. It's really important to know all the different aspects of this that go into the nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. Those are the reductions that we talk about often. And so knowing the people and the stories behind it, the reasons that there's construction equipment, the reasons that there's sediment, holding reasons and ways to hold back that sediment are so important. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us. I'm going to turn it over to our last panelist today. Josh Brengel is an environmental scientist, and so I am eager to hear from him as a Lancaster resident. Some of those needs that you see, you're living and breathing this science every day, and what does that really mean? What does that look like for the science here in Lancaster? And how did you get into this?
Thanks, Allison. As Allison said, my name is Josh Brengel, and I'm an environmental scientist at the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, or SRBC, and I work in our monitoring and protection program. And I've worked at the commission since January 2018, after I completed my master's degree in geoinformatics at Millersville University. And my family, as Allison alluded to, my family and we reside in Mount Joy Borough. So you might actually correctly assume that a job in the environmental field would be heavy on field work, but actually my primary job responsibilities center more on data analysis, report writing, and quote unquote computer work. But thankfully I do still get a chance to get out in the field. And we already spoke about it earlier, but if you're familiar with the Millport Conservancy, one of the pictures on the screen is of myself taking a flow measurement near one of our pieces of equipment on Lidditz Run. And Lidditz Run runs through the Conservancy's property. And that piece of equipment is called a sonde, and it's constantly measuring different things about the water. So for example, temperature and pH. And SRBC itself has a large network of sondes throughout the entire Susquehanna River Basin, which stretches, the basin itself stretches from New York near Cooperstown all the way down to Havre de Grace, Maryland. And we have 7 of those sondes in that network are in Lancaster County alone. But as I said, my main job really centers on data analysis. So specifically, I provide technical support to the DEP's Chesapeake Bay Program Office as part of Pennsylvania's statewide watershed implementation plan efforts. And so that work includes a variety of things like running water quality models. I create maps and figures and provide analysis and updates on current scientific research. But another responsibility that I've recently taken on at the commission is to analyze the data collected by my coworkers as part of SRBC's Sediment and Nutrient Assessment Program. And we call that program SNAP, a lot easier to say. And there are 4 SNAP sampling sites in Lancaster County, the Chickies Creek, Conestoga River, Pequay Creek, and Octoraro Creek. And technically the one in Octoraro is in Maryland, but we'll count it because it's at the mouth of the creek, but it has a large significant drainage in Lancaster County. And so samples are collected regularly at all SNAP sites. And after we get the results back, that's where my job comes in. And I take sort of a deep dive into the data, and I'm looking for trends using some fun statistical tools. Really what I'm trying to do is look for any interesting observations in the data, something that jumps out of the data, off the page, if you will. And one thing I've come to understand about my job is that yes, we collect a lot of great information about water and we do a lot of great analysis on it, but a key piece to it is, and myself, I'm personally trying to improve on this every day, is make that information that we collect easy to digest so it can really be truly used to provide helpful insights. And ultimately, I think it's having those insights that is a critical component to water resource management decisions that are designed for cleaning up local waterways. And with that, I just wanted to thank you again for the invitation, and hopefully you all have a great rest of Clean Water Week.
Thank you, Josh. What a perfect segue into our Q&A, because that's what Water Week is all about, is getting all Lancastrians access to information, part of the celebration of clean water in Lancaster. And so the data is one piece of it. The stories are one piece. Access to clean water is a piece of this that has to be part of all of our stories, whether that's for swimming, for fishing, for drinking. And those three components of Water Week's action steps, those are really key to how many of you are linked. The work that you do, clean water is running through all of that. But those three action steps of creating habitat, exploring outdoors, and protecting water are really foundational elements to many of your stories. So I encourage people on today's panel to either have a story or a reaction to share, but I also encourage our participants today to put a question or a reaction in our Q&A. We want to give you a chance to react to some of the stories and information that you heard today. Please do that in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we will be able to share those back with the entire group. So a question that I have just to get things started, if our panelists could turn your screen, your videos back on, be able to put some faces with names here. I'm curious, I think it was Ryan that mentioned the Bay, the role that Lancaster County plays in the Bay, the Chesapeake Bay story. And really one of the partnership, the Lancaster Clean Water Partner goals in many of your organizations is to improve our local water. And so the work that you all do is focused on Lancaster's water, whether that's the sediment, the nutrients, the stream banks, all those different components. And so I'm curious to pose to the panel, how do we tell that story in a better way? That Lancaster's local waters are so important, but we really do play that key role in a bigger regional approach to restoration as well. Open to anybody.
I can jump in on this one quick. I think that one of the things I remember being presented a while ago was the fact that we are made up almost, 96, 97% of us is water. And so a good component of who we are as physical beings is made up of the water that we drink, which comes from the Susquehanna River Basin, comes from the watershed that we're in, if you're pulling from a well. So I thought that that was always a very, very interesting analogy.
Thanks, Kelly.
I think, so I am not from Lancaster originally. I moved here for this job. You know, most of y'all are, you know, from here, born and bred. But to me, the thing that's, well, there's a lot of special things about this place, but I think everyone acknowledges and embraces how valuable our agricultural products are, you know, that come from Lancaster County. It's a really big part of our culture here. And I think, you know, what comes with that is, you know, it's the good and the bad. And, you know, a lot of agriculture is, can have impacts on water quality. And additionally, you know, we're one of the faster growing or really only growing counties, you know, in PA, and all the increased development pressure also, you know, as good as that is for our economy, there's water quality implications. And I think it is incumbent on us to kind of talk about that. A lot of people sort of assume, I think Demetrius made the, you know, the point about other countries not being, you know, as far along with water. We're really, really lucky here. Even relative to the rest of the US, a lot of places in the US have water quantity issues, and we don't have that here. So I think we need to kind of start to talk about that sort of stuff with the public and share, and because right now we're ahead of the game, but things can be precarious here someday too if we don't, you know, meet our goals that we have in front of us.
We do have some big goals, you're right. And it takes everybody. It takes all these different partner organizations. And I wanted just to call out that those of you who are on the panel today, you play such big, important roles in this water story, but there are some other partners as well that we just give a shout out to, places like the Lancaster Farmland Trust and Penn State, the higher academic institutions. Like you mentioned, many of you went to different kinds of schooling. And so one of the questions from the Q&A is, what kind of classes did you take to get into this water work? Was it super technical, or was it more about the sociology and those interactions, those relationships that we have to develop in order to achieve those big goals we have? So I encourage you all to have open mics and more of that conversation style.
I would like to give some input. Stevens being a technical college, they really gave a combination of the hands-on laboratory experience along with the textbook theories and how they combined everything. We definitely did a lot of tours to see different facilities, different facilities to see how they ran. But it was very hands-on, and I personally really enjoyed the combination that they had, because some people do learn differently. So I had a great experience. I know a lot of people did as well, but it was definitely a combination. So, but some of the classes you learned were drinking water. You also learned the wastewater side of things, and just how everything intertwined and how everything plays an effect, comes together. So
I can help with that too. Back when I was growing up, they didn't have all the really honed in disciplines that they have now. The program at the Career and Tech Center, well, not everybody wants to work out in the dirt and all kinds of weather. You know, that's a great opportunity for a young person that doesn't have to spend any of their own or their parents' money to go to school. You know, they're sending school pays for their senior year to Career and Tech Center, and with not a whole lot more training than that, they can launch a very successful outdoor career that's, you know, they can make very good money in what we do and not have to go through 4 or more years of college to do so.
I know that for myself, I was the part of the first class of environmental studies majors at the University of Richmond. So we were kind of like the guinea pigs in all of this. And so as the fields have grown, things have really shifted. There's so much more science, there's so much more research, there's so many other ways that we can interact with multiple sectors to be part of this clean water story. And I think it was both Demetrius and Brad, you mentioned that, and Josh, your picture, you guys spend a lot of time in the field, but some of the time has to be spent doing the analysis and for computer work. But there's some really fun, Kelly, you mentioned the design and the creativity that can be part of it. So one of the questions in the Q&A is, what percentage of your day on average do you spend in the field?
At Flyway, that can obviously vary. If you're running equipment, you're only going to be out in the field all the time. Our project managers that work in the office, it varies week to week, but they're spending roughly a third to half their time out on project sites, you know, visiting sites, helping to run the projects, and then the rest of their time, you know, stuck behind a computer in here, you know, in the office doing estimating, project management, communicating with people. So it really varies on the position, but anybody here at Flyway except the pure clerical people are out in the field some of the time.
Yeah, I would kind of echo that, Allison. Maybe about a third of the time in the field. Ideally, it would be more, but as others have mentioned, there's a lot of development in Lancaster, and that entails often some level of permitting. So sometimes we're behind the papers a bit more than would be ideal. And I think sometimes you can see more benefit just from having those boots on the ground and interacting with people, having conversations in person on site can sometimes be much more valuable than the work that we also have to do looking at paper or looking at our computer screens. But
yeah, and I would add, I spend about 25% of my time in the field, but there are many coworkers of mine who spend close to 90%, 100% of their time in the field. So I particularly enjoy the computer work, but I do like that balance that I'm provided by getting out in the field every so often and getting out of the office. But for me personally, the skills are the things that I use in my job are like GIS, geographic information systems, and just I use some programming, you know, so it's not, the environmental field doesn't necessarily mean like in-field work, though that's a really fun part of it. So I just wanted to put a plug in for maybe the the computer nerds of us in the environmental field.
We need all types, Josh. We need everybody. Yep. I also want to say thank you to Josh and his leadership role that he plays on the Lancaster Clean Water Partners data action team as well. He was talking about that analysis and the modeling and trying to bring all of those data sources together so that it, like he said, is digestible. So we really appreciate your leadership on our team as well. So Fritz and Kelly, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, I think we can do one more question. That'd be perfect.
Okay, great. So a lot of what we've heard about today, from excavation to in the field to Emily with the planning that has to happen, I have noticed that it's mostly surface water, and one of our participants today would like to know more about the groundwater testing and the work that's done to protect groundwater across the county. So I open that up to the panel. Josh, is there any kind of testing? Yeah,
I was going to add, I think that's an astute observation, and it's something that I'm trying to myself kind of push out to folks that, you know, just because of the nature of Lancaster County's geology, there's maybe a little bit more interaction with the groundwater sources. And the thing that's really popping in my head is I know there are folks doing, I have relationships with at least certain academic institutions out of the University of Delaware who are doing some of the some studies with mill dams as it relates to groundwater and nitrogen levels specifically. And then I think Rupert Rossetti down with the Octor Watershed Collaborative, he's trying to get more into the understanding of the groundwater sources as well. But I agree with the individual who asked the question. That's a great observation.
I can add to that. There was a study that the SRBC did, oh gosh, I'm going to say 15 years ago in northern Lancaster County, and it was a water budget study for an aquifer kind of Ephrata, Mannheim area, about 13 municipalities. And I think it was the first of its type in the state where they were actually looking at groundwater quantity. Quality was not addressed as part of that, but it was a really interesting study and identified where critical recharge areas are within that aquifer. So I always refer to the aquifer as the big bathtub. That's the big guy. That's where we pull our water supply from. And so identifying those locations where we can actually get groundwater recharge in those critical aquifer recharge areas is really important. So that's something that we look at as part of our restoration work, and looking at proactively restoring those critical aquifer recharge areas so that we get that groundwater recharge where it needs to occur and get that interchange, which is what Josh was talking about, between surface and groundwater, so that the water that runs off here is infiltrated back in so that we can maintain our aquifer and our water supply.
Yeah, and to that point that Kelly made about the quantity, the study didn't address quality, I guess, but to my knowledge, I don't believe that DEP tests private well water in the state. Homeowners could certainly do that on their own, but one thing with the geology of our region that Josh mentioned, it being of a limestone formation and prone to sinkholes, it's also prone to pollution. So if we are infiltrating groundwater, which is good as it helps to prevent flooding, we also have to be very mindful that we're not sending polluted water down into that aquifer. So that is one part of the planning and design process that would be important as far as groundwater.
Really key points. Thank you, everyone, because it does come back to those 3 action steps. The 3 elements of Water Week, of creating habitat, exploring outdoors, and protecting water. That's all related to how we use land, the decisions that we all make as members of the Lancaster community, and the perspectives and everything that has created our own career path as members with a clean water thread through it. It's so important that what we do on the land is going to impact the water. And so the better decisions we can make with things like those 3 action steps that really will result in healthier, cleaner water for Lancaster. So I'm so, so grateful for all of you today on the panel and the many stories that you shared with us, the really valuable history and experiences that you bring to the table every day. So around our virtual table today, I'm so glad to be part of it and have you as part of the partnership effort working on this collective common goal. So I will turn it back to Kelly and Fritz for wrapping up here at today's panel.
Thank you so much, Allison. Really appreciate your leadership of this panel, and to all the panelists as well. Thank you. We just want to take this moment to remind everyone that they can take the Lancaster Water Week pledge at lancasterwaterweek.org, and that we will be having 3 more pledge kit pickup locations throughout the week. So sign up early so you have the opportunity to go to any of those 3 that will happen on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at various locations throughout the county. And again, we do have more upcoming online lectures. Please feel free to register on our lancasterwaterweek.org website. All of these recordings, all of these webinars will be recorded and will be sent out following the webinar. So if you're not able to make it at the actual time of the webinar, not to worry, they will be recorded. And again, any of the Q&A questions that we didn't get to, we'll try to get you those answers in an email following this presentation with the recording as well. And I'll hand it back over to Fritz just to say thank you to our sponsors here.
Thanks, Kelly, and thank you so much to Allison and all our panelists for facilitating such a wonderful discussion. I was just sitting here listening and learning and just amazed at how much wonderful activity is happening in the fields, and just so proud of what we are doing as a community, and it's because of professionals like yourselves around clean water and environmental issues. So as Kelly mentioned, we can't do Water Week without our incredible sponsors, and we always want to just recognize organizations like Eurofins and Stroud Water Research, Flyway Excavating, and Brad for all the great work that you're doing in our community. Land Studies, Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and some other partners like the Lancaster County Conservation District, Penn Medicine, and Lancaster General Health, Donegal Trout Unlimited, and the list goes on with Landis Homes and Atlee Hall, Eurofins. They are all what make this possible. And we look forward to having a wonderful week. Hope you'll join us for another presentation here this week, and have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.